So what you were doing was to check whether the levels actually experienced corresponded to the modelling that had been done. Is that what you're saying?
Effectively, yes.
But that's the only occasion when you've actually gone back to check that the models work.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then could we then just also, you took us to the statement of common ground this morning, to paragraph 417.
I did actually. I didn't have it, so
Right. Now you are testing me. I'm not sure that I know what the colour of it is. Just check it. 54. Thank you very much. And I think it was 417 you drew our attention to, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
And that tells us that the plan's alignment was investigated to maximise the dispersion arrangements within the constraints of the site and to reduce the impact upon sensitive receptors. Now, I assume that you had input on agreeing that element of the statement of common ground, and you agree with it, presumably.
I do agree with that, yes.
So, if I understand it correctly, what you're telling us there is that within the constraints of the site, you've done all you can do by way of plant alignment to get the best result, both from dispersion point of view and from the point of view of reducing the impact upon sensitive receptors.
That is what I'm saying. We did modelling for a number of different arrangements and selected this one.
Well, putting it another way, it means you can't achieve better on this site.
Yes, I suppose that's true.
Now, a substantial part of the appeal site is within the air quality management area, isn't it?
Part of it is, yes.
Well, in fact, I think Singleton tells us to go and look at the, in his rebuttal proof, to go and look at the plan in the statement of common ground, which we actually do have in front of you now. And it's in Appendix 4 of the statement of common ground. And we can see which parts within, which parts without, can't we? The site is the red line, isn't it?
Yes, they're doing black and white, and that's harder, but like
I'm sorry.
The bold line, I believe, is the
Right.
red line, yes. So yes, there is a bit extending, which is, I presume, the road on the right one, going underneath the motorway, and then part of the area to the west of the motorway is also within the air quality management area.
I think that is a substantial part of the site.
It is. I don't know whether there's a plan in here showing what is in that part of the site. As I said, the part to the right-hand side is the access road.
Yeah.
And as you draw my attention to in paragraph 417, the stack itself is right at the other end.
Yeah. And of course, the site, and we can actually, in part, see it from that plan that we have in front of us. But the site is also immediately upwind of the largest area of air quality management designation in Greater Manchester.
I'm not sure I can tell that from the plan, but it certainly is indeed upwind of the area. Yes, that area, that direction. Yes.
Sure. And just on this point about what is and isn't upwind, actually, that was another point you touched on, I think, in your evidence this morning. I think you drew our attention to the windrows, which I think are in the environmental statement, aren't they, in chapter 12? I think, is it figure 12.2? Yes, it is. I think the point you were drawing to our attention from those windroses, you were saying that if we look at 2004, there is a significant westerly and southwesterly element to the wind. Also, I think you agreed 2001. But you were saying, the point I think you were making was that the other 3 years, if you look at it, there's a particularly significant southerly contribution for wind.
There was a southerly contribution in all years.
Yes, but yes. I think the point, proportionately, I think you were saying, in those other 3 years, there was more southerly compared to westerly than in the 2004-2001 years. That's the point you were making. And again, I'm not sure if we look at the plan that's in the statement of common ground that we were just looking at, whether north is in exactly the conventional spot on the plan, right on the top, so to speak. But it's broadly, it's broadly in that location, isn't it? And so the other point I think we have to bear in mind when we're looking at the areas of population, some of which we can actually again see on that plan, is that they have the M60 both to the south and the west of them if they're within the M60, don't they?
They do, although it is obviously rather further to the south.
Yeah. Sure. Now, the air quality management area is particularly sensitive to development which may have an impact upon local air quality.
The air quality management area is an area where there are currently high levels of nitrogen dioxide, either above or approaching the quality objective.
Sorry, do you not agree with the proposition that the air quality management area is particularly sensitive to development, which may have an impact on local air quality?
I do, yes.
You do agree with it? I'm not surprised you agree with it. I'm just a little surprised you hesitated because it's in your planning statement.
Indeed.
And so the appeal proposal is cited partly within and partly next to an area which is particularly sensitive to development which may have an impact on air quality.
That is correct, yes.
Indeed, not only partly within and partly adjoining, but also probably fair to say partly within and immediately upwind of such an area, isn't it?
It is immediately upwind of part of that area, yes.
And again, I think it's a common position of this inquiry, isn't it, that currently the EU directive objective for nitrogen dioxide is not being met in that air quality management area.
It is a common position that it is not being met at some points within there. It's sort of entirely conditioned on how much of it.
Okay. And of course, it was a requirement of the directive that it be met by the 1st of January 2010, wasn't it?
It was.
So we're almost 3 years beyond that compliance date. And currently, the UK is in breach of the directive with respect to that AQMA, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Okay. Now, much reference has been made to when the directive might be met in Greater Manchester, Mr.
It has,
Houghton,
yes.
over the last week or so. I'm not sure, I'm sure it's my fault and I haven't spotted it, but I couldn't quite see in your proof or your evidence anywhere where you expressed your view as to when you think it might be met. Have I missed something?
No, I have not expressed my view.
No, I didn't think you had. Is there a reason why you haven't expressed your view on that, Mr. Houghton?
Because I was happy to rely on DEFRA's view.
Well, do you agree that with the view that's expressed by DEFRA? Do you think that's likely to turn out to be accurate, Mr. Houghton?
I haven't reviewed the model in the
So you're not able to say at all when, if at all, you might think it might be met in Greater Manchester. Is that your position?
I have no reason to dispute DEFRA's statements.
Well, I think likewise, you've no reason to dispute the views that were expressed by Dr. Holman and Mr. Watson.
Only to the extent that I can more happily rely on the views of the government.
Is there a reason why, bearing in mind that your clients obviously would be very concerned about the impact of nitrogen dioxide on their proposal and the issues that were being raised about it, is there any reason why it's not something you've not looked into at all, Mr. Hogan?
There is, because the conclusion of the environmental statements and the air quality assessments therein is that the impact of nitrogen dioxide would be negligible at all receptors. So therefore, in my view, that is a sufficient answer to the question.
If we just consider the position of the DEFRA information that was put to the European Commission, Mr. Oaken, can you just remind us when that was actually prepared?
I think we prepared 2008 or 2009.
Yes. And there have been changes in the information that would now be, if one were to do the assessment again, in the information that would be put into any such assessment, haven't there, Mr. Oaken?
If the assessment was done now, I'm sure it would be done with different base data. Yes, I would assume so.
I mean, the first thing, as I understand it, is that the information is national rather than local data that was used for doing the assessment. Is that right?
Yes, that's true.
It didn't take into account any new or proposed development that was consented, did it?
I believe that's true.
And of course, since it was prepared, there have been changes to the fleet composition projections, haven't there?
Yes, I think so. I have checked the date precisely.
Well, I'm told the latest projections actually were issued on the 7th of August of this year.
Okay, that sounds sensible.
And the national atmospheric emissions inventory has been changed as well since then, hasn't it?
It would have been updated, certainly.
And of course, all of those have quite significant implications for an AQMA such as that in Greater Manchester, where it is, as I understand, the common ground that a substantial proportion of the nitrogen dioxide is being contributed to from motor vehicles.
I think not all of it.
No, that's why I said it's substantial, yeah.
No, sorry. You said all of that is relevant.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're quite right. Some of it. You're quite right.
Particularly the emissions factors section.
The emissions factors and the fleet composition projections are all quite important to that one.
Yes.
And so, in actual fact, it's all very well saying this is what DEFRA modelled in 2008 or 2009. It is not by any stretch of the imagination an up-to-date view from DEFRA as to what they consider the position to be, is it, Mr.
I think it actually is the most up-to-date view that DEFRA produced.
It may be the latest one they have produced. It is not up-to-date, is it, Mr.
I don't believe they have updated it now.
Yeah. So it isn't up-to-date, is it, Mr.
No.
No.
Can you resist temptation, Prof? This is Mr. Fraser putting questions to the witness. The witness should be allowed to answer it in his own way.
And of course, the position again is, as I think both Mr. Watson and Dr. Holman explained at the inquiry last week, that since about 2003 there has been very little reduction in NO2 emissions as a result from road vehicles.
There's been less reduction than there was in the previous years, and they said there was much as there was none at all.
No, I didn't suggest there was none. I said very little.
Less, indeed.
And indeed, in order to achieve the sort of projection that we got from DEFRA for Greater Manchester by 2015, there would now have to be a step change compared to what's been going on in the last 10 years, wouldn't there?
Yes, there needs to be significant improvements.
And are you able to identify, because again Mr. Watson and Dr. Holden made it very plain they couldn't, are you able to identify anything that would achieve that step change within a 2-year period?
I would not go into the air quality plans are intended to achieve that, obviously. They're related primarily to either low emission zones or actually attempting to improve traffic emissions.
Are you able to identify anything realistically that you would tell this inquiry you would expect would result in those levels being obtained within 2 years?
No.
So I think the situation when we look at it on the basis of your own evidence is this, Mr. Oakley. You haven't done any work to show that the objective is likely to be met in most of the AQMA by 2015.
No, this is not part of the case.
Yeah. You've not done any work to show that, and in actual fact, you, I think, agree with Mr. Watson and Dr. Holden that it is there isn't going to be a step change to alter the position that we have now, so that it's going to be achieved within 2 and a bit years. Thank you.
The environmental statement and the updated background concentrations against which I've assessed the application is based on emissions now.
Yeah.
The discussion around what will happen in the future in many ways is a response to information submitted. But my position does not change. That I consider the impact of this plant will be negligible, irrespective of what is currently there.
Don't move. We'll get to that in a minute. Shortly, I
think it needs to be said.
Shortly, I hope, but I'm just responding to the evidence that you've given, and obviously the questioning that's been put to Mr. Watson. But I think the position is this, that although you're not prepared to express a view as to what you think the position will be in 2015, when we actually analyse what the situation is now, and your agreement with Dr. Holden and Mr. Watson that you cannot see that step change being achieved by 2015, you are not in any disagreement with them in reality, even though you are not prepared to express a view, are you?
I do not agree with essentially the complete dismissal of the DEFRA modelling, and I agree I'm not able to identify a method to do the step change.
Well, you've also agreed, just so that we're quite clear on it, that there have been a number of changes since the DEFRA modelling was done, which haven't been modelled, and which means that the DEFRA model, of course, does not represent an up-to-date position, haven't you?
I have agreed that, although of course I have not commented, and I'm not pretending to as to what those effective changes would have. I've only commented in that way.
Sure. Now, the site is upwind of Barton, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Sure. Which is a particularly deprived area, isn't it?
I have no knowledge on that.
Right. So you've not looked at it at all, or Mr. Watson's evidence on that?
I know Mr. Watson's evidence is there, not something I considered.
Right. So, but you don't contest it?
I'm not in a position to contest it myself, no.
Sure. And maybe you're going to give me the same answer to this, but I'd better just put it to refer to you. The residents of Barton suffer disproportionately from ill health on the basis of Mr. Watson's evidence, don't they?
Again, no, I can't comment on that.
Okay. tells us it has a particularly poor life expectancy compared to England, the Northwest, and Salford. You're not disagreeing with that?
I'm not looking at that. I'm not disputing that. No.
Okay. Okay. And indeed, we can see from Mr. Watson's evidence, the proportion of this population who perceive their health as not good is nearly 50% higher than the national average. Again, you're not disputing that.
I'm not disputing it, unless you wish me. I haven't looked at it, unless you would like to look at it. I'm not disputing those.
Well, I'm happy to take you to it if you want to. If this is something you need to. You have had, I think, 4 weeks or 5 weeks.
I'm not disputing any of the points in that area.
Is it something you may be taking up with Mr. Tinkleton? I don't know.
Well, I think the trouble is that this opens the witness to deal with air quality, so that's why I think I have to.
But not necessarily the composition of the area.
Well, that may be the case, but I think I have to go through it because
you may, but Mr. Oates is dealing with air quality issues, not planning and associated social environmental issues.
And then likewise, the health status of the Trafford wards surrounding the appeal site are either poor or at average levels for Trafford. Again, you're not disputing that.
I'm not disputing that. I would mention that the socio-economic situation in Trafford was considered in quite a lot of detail in cross-examinations, but I'm not covering that.
That's all right, don't worry. Now, areas of poor health are areas where the inhabitants are particularly vulnerable to deterioration in air quality, aren't they?
Not sure that necessarily follows directly, actually.
Well, you think that as able to cope with deterioration in air quality as healthy people?
It depends why they are not healthy, I would say. The point I think you are making, though, is yes, if people are already not well, then additional stimuli they'll be less able to cope with.
Yeah. I think you agree with that.
Yes, that's fine.
So, if which you're not disputing, Barton is an area of poor health, like close to you, that obviously is an area that would be, or the inhabitants of which would be particularly vulnerable to deterioration in air quality.
I guess other things being equal, yes, that is true.
And likewise, in Trafford, where we can see that some of the wards are poor compared to the rest of Trafford, they would be less able to cope than other parts of Trafford, wouldn't they?
I suspect I should go to that bit, to be honest. Where is that? Where would I find that evidence in the wards?
About the Trafford wards. That's
Yes.
in Miss Harding's proof. Let me just find it for you. Don't worry, you haven't got to got a proof. I'm sorry. I can understand why you might have thought you'd need to do apologize. It's page 54 when you get to the copy of this survey.
Page 54.
Page 54, paragraph 6.7.1.
To remind what the question
Oh, right, I thought you'd answered the question, but I'll put it to you again to be fair to you, to give you another chance to answer it in the light of having seen that. Those wards where the health status is poor compared to Trafford as a whole would be wards where the inhabitants are less able to cope with the deterioration in air quality than Trafford as a whole, wouldn't they?
Yes, as you said, if the health levels are lower, it is like that is the case.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, again, I think it's common ground, isn't it, that nitrogen dioxide is harmful to health.
Yes.
Thank you. And indeed, research has not been able to establish a safe level for nitrogen dioxide.
I'm not sure whether that is true.
Well, let's just say that's Mr. Watson's proof you need to just turn to for a moment. Don't think anybody suggested to him that it wasn't correct. Page 87 of his proof. Paragraph 417.
Yes, so what about this saying the threshold pollutant? In other words, so yes, there will be an impact from nitrogen dioxide.
Yeah. Well, what it's saying is it's not possible to establish a threshold below which there isn't an effect on human health.
Yes, on the basis of the epidemiological studies carried out so far.
And we can agree, I think, effect there means harmful effect as compared to beneficial effect.
Yes, I'd have thought so, yes.
And indeed, what we can see, whilst you've had the proof in front of you, we're told in the next paragraph, aren't we, the author is going on to suggest it's desirable to adopt an annual mean of 20 micrograms per cubic metre as a long-term mean standard to protect public health.
That is what the authors have said, yeah.
Which would be, again, as Mr. Watson observed, effectively half that which is the current EU directive objective.
That is what it says, yes.
Now, it is also clear, I think, from what we've already agreed, that there are people within the air quality management area, in that part of the air quality management area, which is of concern with respect to this appeal, who are in poor health.
I'm sure there are people who are in poor health living in that area, yes.
Okay. And they are subject to levels in excess of the current EU objective.
I can't guarantee it's the same people, but there are people there.
Well, unless there's some very, very odd distribution of them within those walls, they will undoubtedly be some of them, won't they?
The reason I'm saying that is because you previously referred to Barton specifically, which is essentially, if I'm getting my geography roughly correct, is the area which is to the east of the M60. I don't think it extends right next to the M60, but I may be wrong. Whereas what the evidence which we presented up to now suggests that the areas which are exceeding the air quality objective are those very close to the M60. So what I'm not agreeing is that the whole of Barton, which is the area referred to as having poor health, is entirely exceeding the air quality objective.
Yeah, sorry, if the way I put the question to you suggested that it wasn't intentional this time. But parts of Barton are within the air quality management area and exceeding the objective figure, aren't they?
And the answer is I would like to check where Barton extends to. There is a drawing that shows that somewhere.
Right. So which drawing do you want us to look at?
Assuming there is a drawing showing boundaries in somewhere in the single.
Mr. Fraser, I know I have a plan in mind. If he's put the point that parts of Barton are in an area where air quality management levels are being exceeded, then I assume there is a plan in mind that we could look at.
No, I haven't got in mind.
Okay, this is a flower if you want to plan as you said.
What?
You're not suggesting a particular plan?
No, I'm not.
Because I'm not aware of where the boundary of Barton is.
Okay. But in actual fact,
Mr. Watson's proof of evidence says plan.
sorry, you're quite right. That is right. Thank you very much. I didn't come with a plan prepared. I didn't think it was a controversial issue. So it's okay. Of course, it isn't. Again, we've got to remind ourselves, it isn't just Barton that we have to consider, because we also have the wards within Trafford that we were just discussing before.
Sorry, can I just return to that plan? So I have to just slightly more carefully. What you've said is that you are linking the high levels of deprivation to high levels of impact, of lower levels of health. And what's notable from the plan on paragraph 445 is that the high levels of deprivation within Barton are towards the eastern end of Barton, whereas the high levels of impact on air quality are towards the western end of the motorway.
Well, I don't think that's in. I don't think it's as regular as that is actually, because I think we can't say that it's just towards the east of Barton that you have the high levels of deprivation, can we?
We can say from this plan that those where there are areas which are more deprived than not with say beyond 20-30% are in fact level. If you look at the dark coloured ones.
Well, sorry, we can see that the dark coloured ones. I'm having to look over here to see the colour because I couldn't black and white on it. I think you can see the dark coloured ones. In fact, the darkest coloured ones we have both in the east. Gosh, I've lost it. In the east, the centre, and indeed even over to the west. Although I'm struggling. No, yes,
It's a very little bit. You're right.
Just within Barton.
A very little bit of Barton on the west.
Yes.
Whereas what I said, yes, I realise it's a semantic point, but the areas where the air quality is accepted to be very poor, even passing over the Liverpool road which I'm sure we'll return to, which are the areas around very close to the motorway, are primarily the areas which are least deprived within Barton, whereas the areas which are mainly most deprived within Barton are towards the other end. That's the only point I'm making.
But if we're really needing to press this point, Mr. Overton, if we just look at the western part of Barton, where there's a sort of a promontory sticking out, isn't there, really?
Yes.
We have some of that clearly within the 3% most deprived nationally.
Yes, so it's more percent, yes.
That I think is close to the motorway, isn't it?
A small bit it is, yeah.
In the AQMA?
I think so, which is a fair amount, but yes, I think so.
And again, we'll come to just how much in a moment, Mr. Overton, so don't worry about it. But again, it is common ground between everybody, I think, in this inquiry, that this proposal will add to the nitrogen dioxide levels within the air quality management area.
Yes, that is common ground.
So, bearing in mind the qualifications that you've just given us about which bits of Barton we need to look at, but bearing in mind also it's not just Barton that we have to look at, we also have to look at the Trafford wards we discussed. The result of this proposal is that an area that already suffers disproportionately from ill health will be subjected to a deterioration in air quality.
What we conclude is that it's subjected to a negligible reduction. Yeah.
Well, so I think the answer that you're giving me is yes, it will, but you would qualify the deterioration with the word negligible.
Correct, because otherwise what we're saying is that any deterioration of any sort within Barton is unacceptable, and sadly that means Barton is no longer open for renting.
Okay. Now, that deterioration comes again, doesn't it, after a long history of the area being subjected to what I think everybody would now agree as unacceptable levels of air pollution. I'm talking about the history.
This is going back to the history of the things in Trafford, areas in Trafford Park.
Yeah.
That is probably true, yeah.
And of course, there is growing public concern about air quality, isn't there?
no growing concern in this room.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Well, I wasn't putting it, as I think you understand, Susan, I wasn't putting it in terms of whether the people in this room have grown more concerned during the course of the inquiry or not.
No.
The point I was putting to you is that the public at large, not, irrespective of this particular proposal, are voicing growing concern about air quality.
I'm not trying in a position to agree or disagree with that. Okay.
So you can't say.
I can't say whether the population at large are growing more or less concerned about air quality, whether that's a major concern they have at the moment or an increasingly major, which I think what you're suggesting.
And indeed, it's quite clear also that the scientific community continues to consider the issue of air quality and what is desirable or necessary, among other things, for human health. That's right.
Yes, that's fair.
And again, as we could see, for example, from the review of the literature relating to nitrogen dioxide, which Mr. Watson summarised, and which we looked at a few minutes ago, it is again clear, isn't it, that the scientific community in looking at this matter has not arrived at a settled view as to what is an acceptable level for human well-being of nitrogen dioxide, has it?
I'm not sure you can interpolate that from the papers which have been submitted, but I agree that scientists are continuing to look at this point.
Okay. And there is therefore, isn't there, Mr. Oaten, a clear and sound basis for people to be concerned that air quality should be improved in their local area.
Should be one.
Improved in their local area.
I agree that there is a basis for people to be concerned that air quality should be improved, yes.
Okay. And of course, if you are in an area that is not currently meeting the European objectives, that concern will plainly be enhanced amongst the public, won't it?
And that would be logical, yes.
And not only that, but they will again logically have a clear and sound basis to be concerned that those levels should be achieved as soon as possible.
That I think is fair as well, yes.
Now, again, the planning system and the professionals in this room, Mr. Oaten, will clearly proceed on the assumption that the pollution control system will operate efficiently and effectively.
Yes.
But that doesn't of itself remove public concerns, does it?
No, I would guess it doesn't.
Could you just help me on this, please? If we just turn to the Environment Agency decision, which is 67B. The Environment Agency, I don't think we need to turn precise reference for it. I don't think it's an issue. The Environment Agency didn't agree with you as to the use of the chemistry module, did they?
No.
And I know you explained in your rebuttal why you still think it was a perfect option to do so. I'm not asking about that.
I didn't know.
But but the Environment Agency made it plain in their decision that they didn't think it should be used as a basis of their decision, and they looked at the effect of using the Environment Agency's own assessment criteria.
That is right, they didn't accept the use of it in their assessment.
Okay. Now, if we turn to page 65 or perhaps to page, just so that we understand what's being discussed, to page 63 of the decision, we can see at the bottom of page 63 there's an assessment of cumulative impact is undertaken.
Yes.
And the various different developments which are being considered within this cumulative impact assessments are then explained on the next couple of pages. And then we come up into page 65 where we get the sort of the judgment of the agency on that particular issue.
We do, yes.
That's what we see.
Yes.
And we can see what they tell us is that whilst there would be increases of 12% at one location, increases of 5 to 6% at the affected locations are more common. The highest impacts were predicted to occur along Liverpool Road, and it can be seen from figure 6 in appendix C of the air quality report that the impact of the biomass plant on Liverpool Road is less than 0.3 micrograms per cubic metre. Taking the most effective receptor from the Port Salford AQMA, which is Liverpool Road east of the M60, the concentration was predicted to increase from 45.5 to 51.2 micrograms per cubic metre. The biomass plant is predicted to add less than 0.3 micrograms per cubic metre to this concentration, which is 0.6% of the predicted concentration, so it has a negligible contribution to the exceedance of the EQS. So what's certainly being said there, the assessment, the basis on which it's being done, is that the impact of the biomass plant on Liverpool Road is less than 0.3 micrograms per cubic metre.
That's what they said, yes.
Now, I think the air quality report that is referred to there is a document that was submitted as part of permitting, rather than a document before the
that is correct,
inquiry.
yes.
But I think the same figure, is actually a figure from the environmental statement, isn't it?
In this system, this part of the discussion on the air quality assessment, it was basically essentially the same document, reformatted really.
Well, that's my understanding. I think Mr. Watson's gone away and checked it, so I don't think we really need to burden the inquiry.
In all material respects under this question, I agree with that.
Yes, I don't think we need to burden the inquiry with the document. And indeed, if we turn to chapter 12 of the environmental statement, now this is another one where I think I've given page numbers to Mr. Kingston. Mine's at page 296, but it's paragraph 12.19, so I think the paragraph numbers fortunately still work out. So
Paragraph
12.192, sorry.
Yes.
And that's a section that's dealing with cumulative effects.
It is where the essential, yes.
And indeed, I think if we then turn to 12.197, we can see that in the ES, the conclusion of this sort of cumulative assessment is undertaken, isn't it?
Yes.
And indeed, I think you referred to this paragraph in your rebuttal, in fact. And I think actually, if we compare 12.197 with the paragraph I've just read out from the decision, it bears a striking similarity.
It is remarkably similar.
It's not word for word, but I think it's really probably a matter of altering it to put it into the decision, so to speak, isn't it?
Changes of case, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that refers us to figure 12.6.
It does.
Which I think is the equivalent of figure 6
yes.
from appendix C.
Yes.
And if we turn to figure 12.6, we can see, can't we, that this is an assessment that's been done using the chemistry module.
We can, yes.
Which is the basis of assessment which the Environment Agency rejected.
It is, yes.
And is there any explanation anywhere we can see as to why the Environment Agency rejected the chemistry model as an appropriate way of assessing the matter, but then have relied upon it on the cumulative assessment?
No.
Do you think that's something that might have public concerns?
No. The honest answer is I would be relatively surprised if that specific point had its public concerns. I mean, that's public concerns now you mentioned it.
Because, of course, if we go back in the environmental statement to look at 12.4, for example, which is using the EA guidance factor for nitrogen dioxide, for calculating nitrogen dioxide, we can see that at Liverpool Road, you're then at, I think it's 0.6. Well, it's within the 0. It's more than 0.6, isn't it?
It's about 0.6, maybe slightly more at that point.
It's
yes.
more than 0.6.
Yes.
It's more than 0.6. So clearly a different situation to that which the Environment Agency seemed to have been accepting in the decision.
Certainly a different number, yes.
If we just go back to the decision document, page 65 that we looked at, what we can see is that they tell us that looking at the most effective receptor from the Port Salford at Liverpool Road, the concentration is predicted to increase from 45.5 to 51.2 micrograms. That, I think, is an increase of 5.7 micrograms per cubic metre, is that right?
Yes.
So can you just take me through the reference again?
Sorry,
the last
page
paragraph.
65. The last paragraph we read out before,
Yeah.
page 65.
Yeah.
So there's an increase of 5.7. Sorry, that's like 5.7 micrograms. That's, I think, from the other developments, other than the appeal process.
It's specifically coming from
Port
the
Salford.
Port Salford and Salford Red Stadium, I think associated with either Wiggett or part of Wiggett.
Okay, yeah. But that's the addition from the other development that's going into the cumulative impact assessment here, to which you then have to add the contribution from the appeal proposal, I think.
That's right, yes.
Which we can see, if it had been done consistently with what the Environment Agency say elsewhere, would have been something just over 0.6 micrograms.
In the worst case.
That would lead us to a situation where the cumulative impact of the proposal is about 15% of the EQS, adding over 6 micrograms to the background level.
The answer is if you were to add the already consented emission, which is most of it, to our bit, you'd achieve that, yes.
Well, we are clearly told by government guidance to look at cumulative impacts, aren't we?
I assume that's true. I can't think of the specific reference you're going to give me, but I'm sure that is true.
Well, for example, if you want me to, I can take you to MPP, the framework NPPF.
I'm not going to dispute it. I'm sure your statement, I'm sure it's there.
Don't always, I wouldn't deliberately mislead you, but don't always assume that I'm right. Right. And of course, if we just remind ourselves of the EPOC guidance that you've relied upon, Mr. Overton, a 15% change to the background would be a large change.
It would, but that's not associated with this development, so we're using that in an inappropriate way.
And of course, again, a large change in an area that's already over the 40 micrograms per cubic metre objective would be a substantial adverse impact using the efforts items.
Yes, and yes, it was granted permission.
Just help me on this also, Mr. Overton. It is possible, isn't it, for a developer or an operator who finds difficulty in meeting the requirements of the permit to go back to the Environment Agency to ask for the requirements to be relaxed?
I would agree with that statement, yes.
Have you experienced that happening?
I have been involved in submitting variations for permits, if that's what you mean, yes.
Well, seeking a relaxation on the basis that you can't achieve what you were initially expecting to be able to achieve.
I don't have personal experience of that, no.
Well, are you aware that that's ever happened in the past?
It has happened at Port Talbot, on the last plan, I believe.
Again, isn't that something that feeds into public concern?
Yes.
Even accepting, as we do, that the pollution control regime work efficiently and effectively.
I suppose that might lead to concerns if they felt the Environment Agency would simply make that change without considering the impact. But happily that isn't true. So Port Talbot, I say, I'm not involved with it directly, so I'm relying on what I've read here. An application was made to vary the emission limits upwards. The Environment Agency then assessed the impact of the plant as varied, agreed that the impact would be negligible, and therefore accepted the increased emission limits. The emission limits they had applied to go up to were still obviously well within the regulatory requirements, the waste and large combustion duct credit specifically. As they assessed the impact, decided the impact of the varied plant was negligible, and therefore willing to accept the variation.
Again though, that type of background history which the public are aware of does feed into this concern about what might happen in the future, doesn't it, as far as the public is concerned?
It feeds in if we are in the position that the public do not trust the regulator, I think is what you're really leading up to here.
Yeah.
So they don't trust the regulator to protect the environment when considering variation, then they may be so concerned, yes.
And sorry, Port Talbot, is that adjacent to the QMA?
I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
Having said that, and again, I would have to check the precise wording if you need me to, but as I recall, the emission limits which were being increased were those for acidic gases, not for the nitrogen dioxide, which the AQMA was probably declared.
If you want to check it by all means.
I'm pretty certain that's true.
Well, I don't know one way or the other, but if you want to check it, by all means do. And of course, public anxieties themselves do have, public anxieties themselves do in fact have health impacts in themselves, don't they? I'll probably put that very elegantly, I do apologise.
You're saying that public
anxiety itself.
Anxiety can be a health effect in itself.
Yes.
Even without anything else.
Yes.
Yes, I agree. Anxiety can be a health effect.
It adversely, in itself, it adversely affects, or can adversely affect health itself.
Yes, that's correct.
And indeed, I don't think you relied on Professor Bridges I don't think he contests that, does he? I think he himself recognises that anxiety itself can have adverse impacts upon health.
I think he does like a check, but I don't think he disputes that point. No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just trying to remember where he is now. He's in one of your appendices, isn't he?
Appendix
2 of the name group.
Yeah.
Or something.
The appendix 2 on the other way around. Appendix 1 of the main group.
Appendix 1 of the main.
No, it would be in it wouldn't be in that one, it would be the one after the rebuttal.
In the rebuttal, right, sorry. Cool.
I recall him considering anxiety. I'm not sure he considered anxiety as a health effect. So he considered anxiety as a contributor to perception.
Well, if we just look at his conclusion, for example, page 14,
Yes.
this is the main proof we've got, appendices, sorry, so it's appendix 1. Page 14, down at the bottom of the page, we can see, tells us very plainly that it may be concluded that risk perception of any environmental hazard may cause anxiety and have an impact on public health.
Yes.
And I think if we read through his report, there are a number of references to that which lead up to his conclusion.
Yes, I would agree with that one.
I think that, sorry, but I think that was the appendices to the rebuttal.
It was appendix 2 rebuttal, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, so it was, yes. Right, thank you.
Just checking the calculator.
And likewise, and I think it's still in these appendices in the rebuttal, it's appendix 1. Professor Bridges doesn't, I think, disagree with or dispute the DEFRA guidance on the subject. For example, if we turn to page 11 of those appendices, or that appendix, we can see, for example, there where he's referring to a particular study, and he has bullet points set out same sorts of factors as are being identified in the DEFRA study as
Yes.
affecting perception.
Yes, indeed.
And indeed, I don't think anywhere does Professor Bridges contest the Department of Health guidance on this issue.
I don't think he does, no.
Okay. What he does tell us, I think, is that concerns about risk and perception of risk may not correlate to the actual level of health risk.
He does say that, yes.
Putting it that a slightly different way, that means, doesn't it, that concerns about risk and perception of risk may not correlate to an objective assessment of risk based on research.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And it means, therefore, doesn't it, that an objective assessment of risk cannot of itself tell us what the levels of public anxiety will be, can it?
That's true.
And nor, since anxiety impacts upon health, as Professor Bridges has told us, will an objective assessment of risk be able to predict what the impacts on health will be? Will it?
No, I suppose along those lines it suggests that if we wish to reduce the aspect of impact on health, which is primarily related to anxiety about what something might do, as opposed to what it does do, there are try to be as open as possible about the actual impacts and try to explain that. Or we could keep quiet and hope no one notices, which is not the approach taken, obviously. But I agree, anxiety is not linked to actual impacts in any way.
I think you agree with me.
Okay, anxiety is not. It means
Well,
that you cannot assess the impact on anxiety based on what you're actually doing.
Yes. An objective assessment isn't going to tell us what the levels of public anxiety will be, and as the levels of public anxiety of themselves have health impacts, an objective assessment will not be able to predict the health impacts.
An objective assessment of the actual health impacts will not be able to predict the impact of anxiety related to it. No.
Which will itself impact on health.
Yes.
Which means that it will not, the objective assessment will not actually be able accurately to predict the health impacts, will it?
Indeed.
So if we simply focus on the objective assessment, which is what Professor Richards asked us to do, we will actually not be answering the question as to what are the levels of public anxiety and what will their impacts upon health be, will we?
No.
And indeed, sadly, one of the reasons why we have public anxiety is that the public is sceptical of these objective assessments. Whether it's right or wrong to be sceptical of them, I'm not asking you to comment on it, but that is the fact of the matter, isn't it?
I think it's important to consider why people are sceptical. Because I would like to think people are not automatically sceptical of anything the scientist ever says. That would be rather unfortunate. So, I agree that people are sceptical of what has been presented. That is because an alternative view has been presented which says this is wrong.
Well, let's be clear about it. Sorry. I'm sure you should be, Mr. When it happens, you can say I was the first to say it. Or perhaps not. What I was going to say to you, Mr. Oak, is that, of course, what we have to bear in mind is that science is often presented as if it's clear cut, but in actual fact there's a lot of uncertainty in science itself.
I'm not sure I actually agree with that. Science is much more presented on the basis of assessment of risk. We've kept going on about nitrogen dioxide. I have not said there will be no nitrogen dioxide release. I said there will be a negligible amount. I have said there will be a negligible risk to human health. It's not saying absolute nothing. It's quantifying risk. I disagree with that statement.
Right, well, sorry, I want to be clear what it is you're disagreeing with. You're disagreeing, I think, with the proposition that science is often presented as if it's clear cut. You're actually agreeing, I think, that there's quite a degree of uncertainty in science.
I wasn't disagreeing that science is presented as clear cut necessarily by science. I suspect science is presented as clear cut
by non-scientists. That might be
exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
That might be a fair complaint, actually, Mr. Root. What you're saying is that amongst scientists, amongst scientists who go about their work diligently, it is appreciated that there's a significant degree of uncertainty associated with science. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, okay. Just about, yes.
Yeah. Can you just help me also, since you've relied upon Professor Bridges with his background, I think he gave similar evidence some years ago about relying upon these objective assessments in support of the tobacco companies.
In support of what? Sorry.
The tobacco companies, and arguing that really we hadn't established there was a problem with smoking.
I can't comment on that. What I would comment, though, is that I'm aware that point was raised as an inquiry relatively recently. A response was submitted, and that has now been given planning permission by the Secretary of State.
So you don't know the answer?
I know it has been addressed, I don't know the answer.
And again, I think one of the issues or one of the difficulties we labour with here is that it is very difficult to conduct epidemiological studies because of the complexity of factors that affect public health.
Yes.
Sure. And indeed, that is, again, we can see exemplified, can't we, with the time that it took to have generally accepted that there were issues, for example, with asbestos or with smoking, although I think there is a general consensus now that there are issues.
Position to comment on it, but I agree at the time for the health risks associated with those have become accepted.
I'm not trying to score points against people on that. It's just, I think, a reflection, isn't it, of the difficulty of actually producing these epidemiological studies to establish conclusively things, even though there may well be a strong view that there's something behind them.
Yes, I think that is true.
And again, the fact that it is so difficult to establish these matters with these studies, and that it may then take a long time for official action consequent upon them, that again is something that feeds into public concerns and the scepticism about assurances that they are given.
Yes, that's probably correct.
And indeed, to be fair to the HPA, they don't say that this proposal will not have any effect, do they? I think in your proof you actually quote them, don't you? So we can turn to it if you want, by all means.
Yeah, there are significant health risks for lack of.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. You take me to where you should take me.
No, I thought you wanted to go, and I'm just trying to remember where it is now in your proof, because you do actually, I think it's page 15, you do actually have their statements which you tell us about. And indeed, what they, do you have it there, sorry, page 15 of your main proof, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You quote from them, and I think you quote from them on two occasions, effectively. The first statement we can see, they tell us about 3 lines down, while it's not possible to rule out adverse health effects from modern, well-regulated municipal waste incinerators with complete certainty, any potential damage to the health of those living close by is likely to be very small if detectable. And then they, I think, make the point again, and I think, to be fair, you tell us that the underlining is yours rather than theirs.
Yeah.
And then they make the point at the end of that passage, since any possible health effects are likely to be very small, detectable studies of public health around modern, well-managed municipal waste incinerators are not recommended.
Yeah.
Okay. And then going on, they then have announced further research where they say, and we quote from that also, it's important to stress our current position on the potential health effects of well-run regulated modern municipal waste incinerators remains valid. I think that's referring back effectively to the previous statement.
Yeah.
This is that while it's not possible to rule out adverse health effects from modern well-regulated municipal waste incinerators with complete certainty, any potential damage to the health of those living close by is likely to be very small. Detectable, this view is based on detailed assessments of the effects of air pollutants on health, and on the fact that modern and well-managed municipal waste incinerators make only a very small contribution to local concentrations of air pollution. However, we recognise that there are public concerns about this issue, and this study will provide valuable new evidence. HPA continues to seek to review and extend the evidence base on which advice, and therefore we're delighted to support the new study, which is going to just tell us what we're doing.
Yes.
So the position is, isn't it, the general position, the HPA, is that they accept that this sort of development could have an effect upon health, but it's likely to be very small.
I think that's putting slightly the wrong emphasis there. What they're saying is they can't prove a negative. So they can't prove it definitely doesn't have a health effect. But any potential damage, so if there were any, it would be likely very small if detectable. So again, going back to the dangerous scientists not being clear cut, they can't prove a negative, they can say it. They just say it's going to be very small.
Right. I'm not sure that's disagreeing with what I put to you, though, is it? Because that is saying, well, it could have an effect, but it's likely to be very small.
Yes, but I think you're overemphasising it could.
That's not what I mean. But, I mean, importantly here, we don't see, I think, anywhere, and I think we looked at it, I think it's called document 34, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Perhaps we should just dig that out and have it in front of us. Because that's which we've just been addressing so far, I think, is the HPA's general position, so to speak, isn't it?
It is.
Its actual position with respect to this particular proposal, I think we see set out in Code Document 34.
We do.
Yeah. And I don't think in Code Document 34 we see anywhere, do we, the HPA address the impact of additional air pollution on the AQMA in this location.
Only to the extent which I covered in G.
Well, you show me where you say that the HPA addressed the impact of additional air pollution on the AQMA in this document.
I was taken to section 5 of the document, and I referred on the page, the second page which has section 5 in it.
Yep.
I pointed out that firstly they said that calculation percentage shows that contributions are considered to be insignificant. So generally they're insignificant. And then in the final paragraph they comment about the fact that emissions of nitrogen dioxide levels in the AQMA are likely to be high, since it's an AQMA, and that despite emissions of nitrogen dioxide levels being extremely low, they will add to the high levels as we've discussed previously. And then they say that in terms of assessing the effect of this on the air quality management area, as in the local authorities' requirements to control air quality in air quality management areas, that is a matter for the local authority. I agree that they do not specifically address the point that you are raising. They address it in general terms in terms of comparable air quality standards and saying the impact is insignificant.
Well, let's just look at that a moment. If we go back to the beginning of section 5, we can see over the page it's dealing with point source emissions to air.
Yeah.
And for the first paragraph, I think it's just setting the background. It's not forming any conclusion of the HPA at all. And then the second paragraph, again, I think is setting out what is the result of your modelling. I think, in fact, that is all that is said in the second paragraph. Which, again, it's just reporting what's being said by the appellants, or the applicants, and the modelling. So it's the final two paragraphs where the HPA actually come on to any assessment by themselves. And it's quite plain that the first paragraph of those two paragraphs does not apply to nitrogen dioxide, because they tell us they're going to consider it separately below.
Yes.
So we have to turn to the second paragraph, where we're told, we note the proposed facility is situated close to an AQMA, determined on nitrogen dioxide levels, and despite emissions of nitrogen dioxide levels being extremely low, they will inevitably add to the existing high levels. Diffusion tube data indicates background levels are particularly high and above the AQS objective in the northern part of the AQMA. We understand the responsibility of assessing such impact lies with, or rests with the local authority, and so we don't intend to comment further on this specific issue. So if we look at the preceding paragraph, we've been told that nitrogen dioxide is going to be dealt with below. It's dealt with below, and what they tell us is we're leaving that to the local authority. We're not going to comment further. Don't they?
Yes, so the paragraph begins with the exception of, they say, we are also reassured. So in other words, they've been reassured in the previous paragraph that everything is insignificant. They are further reassured, with the exception of nitrogen dioxide, that everything else is below the air quality objective. And then with regard to nitrogen dioxide, they consider that control of nitrogen dioxide in terms of an air quality management area is responsibility of the local authority. I do not agree that they are saying impact of health on health of nitrogen dioxide is not our responsibility, because that clearly wouldn't be true. And if that was their view, they could possibly come to the conclusion they do come to it in Section 8.
Well, I'm sorry, where do we see them considering nitrogen dioxide again in this? Because we can see, for example, if we turn to the human health risk assessment in Section 6, they're dealing with dioxins, aren't they?
They are, yes.
Other contaminants of potential concern, and then particulates. But we don't see them dealing with nitrogen dioxide anywhere there, do we?
No, in that section they're dealing with pollutants which do not have air quality standards. They're dealing with pollutants where the main route for exposure is through food, which is what that section is dealing with. Nitrogen dioxide is not that type of pollutant.
I think, to be fair, the only other reference we can find, just to be entirely fair to you, the only other reference we can find about nitrogen dioxide, we do see in 7.2, I think, where we go back to cumulative effects from nearby facilities.
Yes, they cover it there as well, yes.
That's the only other place that we see them. But
yes.
I don't see it anywhere where they actually address this issue, having told us in the concluding paragraph in section 5 that they're not going to comment further on the issue and leaving it to the local authority. Anywhere where they come back and address the health impacts of additional air pollution on the AQMA?
No, as I've explained before, and I did it, may take some time, so I will say it again. What has been said is that the calculation has shown that this is insignificant in itself. And then they comment that the question of effect on the air quality management area, in terms of the local authority's responsibility in that area, are the jobs of the local authority. They then conclude in Section 8, this installation does not present any obvious cause for concern. And what they don't do in there is say, and some caveats are that nitrogen dioxide is a problem.
Well, they've told us they're leaving that to the local authority, haven't they?
But their advice does not present any obvious cause for concern.
Well, what their advice is that based on the information provided in the application, the installation doesn't present any obvious cause for concern in regard to significant health risk to local receptors, providing it's well managed and
yes.
maintained. But we have to read that, don't we, having looked at what else they have told us, and that includes that they have left that particular assessment for the local authority.
As is clear, I don't agree with your interpretation. I can repeat it, but
I think you have to, though. The views of both sides.
Right. Well, I'm happy to deal with it by submissions if that's more helpful to you. So, and of course, we have to bear in mind that that's in a situation. We have to view that in the context of a situation, don't we, where the HPA have considered it's appropriate to commission further general research on the issues linked between emissions and health outcomes.
They have commissioned a very specific piece of research looking at the purported link between incineration plants would lead to that sort of outcome.
Well, if we just go back to the statement they made announcing the additional researchers, again, you're through paragraph 2.5.2. What we can see again is that the Health Protection Agency's position is it's not possible to rule out adverse health effects with certainty.
Yes.
And they recognise that there is public concern about this issue.
Yes.
And indeed, they concluded that the public concern is such as indeed to merit further research.
Yes.
So, again, no suggestion by the HPA that the public concern is unfounded or irrational.
Not in the press release, no, I agree.
Well,
There's no suggestion.
Well, sorry.
Yeah.
You're not suggesting that that's really what they think, but that this is all just sort of spin for the public.
Well, the only comment I would make in that respect, and I think I agree they understand that public concerns are well founded given the information which is being presented to the public. Their position prior to the press release was that studies of public health around modern law management is worse areas are not recommended. They haven't removed that, but they are still doing it in response to public concern.
Well, I haven't actually thought of that. You're quite right, Mr. You're quite right. It may rather suggest that they've been over that last bit of general advice has been overtaken by events.
Yes, they are now carrying out a study in response to public concern.
Okay. Well, but if we remind ourselves that their general position was, as you tell us, that they didn't recommend further studies,
Yeah.
the fact that they're now actually themselves supporting commissioning further studies does seem to suggest that they think there is, or there must be some proper sound basis for doing that.
No, I think it is related to public concerns and the fact that, as I think has been discussed in other inspectors' reports, there's nothing wrong with the Health Protection Agency commissioning additional research. That seems like a very sensible thing for them to do. The fact they haven't felt it needed before, they now feel it is needed in response to public concern is a movement. I agree.
Well, if you are saying that the only reason for it is public concern, it's a very clear recognition by the HPA as to just how significant public concern is. That's the only reason to do this further research, bearing in mind that they've previously been saying it wasn't that common.
I mean, they acknowledge that there is public concern.
The answer to my question.
I'm not sure what the question was.
If you're saying that the only reason for conducting this further research is public concern, then the fact that they have commissioned this further research is a clear indication as to how significant they conclude the public concern is, bearing in mind that their previous position is, or was, further research was not recommended, didn't it?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Just bear with me a moment, let's just check it out. Yes, the views expressed in the waste strategy, which you turn to if you want, called document 76, that research carried out to date shows no credible evidence of adverse health outcomes for those living near the
Sorry,
site.
what was the reference?
Called document 76. That research carried out to date shows no credible evidence of adverse health outcomes for those living near incinerators. That advice depended indeed on the report commissioned by DEFRA. which I think in turn, if I've got my note mark here, is called Options 85. And the DEFRA work, I think, reviewed 23 studies.
No, I don't think that's true.
Right, do we need to just turn that up? I'm sorry, you want to just
85, yeah.
I don't want to. Yes, it is.
Have we finished with 76?
Well, I didn't actually. I wasn't going to take 76 out. I was just explaining. Explaining what it mechanically needs to. So,
the suggestion was that the statement in the waste direction 2007 depended on the DEFRA study.
yeah.
That's the problem.
Well, I think that was accepted. What was accepted, I think, was what the study was based on.
For those who raised the question, we could check the other report or the that effect.
No, sorry.
In case I'll have a look at 76 to confirm that position.
Well, by all means.
Call on 76.
It wasn't on 76. All right, then.
Page 77, paragraph 22. I thought Fred was referring to page 77, paragraph 22. Here there's another paragraph that has to be corrected.
No.
So, reading that paragraph, there is no such reference to the 2004 environmental study. So, we reach that conclusion from that paragraph. And in fact, it moves on. It's worth reading the whole paragraph to know where we are. It says, concern over health effects is most frequently cited in connection with incinerators. Research carried out to date shows no credible evidence of adverse health outcomes for those living near incinerators. The relevant health effects, primarily cancers, have a long incubation time. But the available research demonstrates an absence of symptoms related to exposures 20 or more years ago, when emissions from incineration were much greater than they are now. Very demanding EU standards for dioxin emissions now apply. The Health Protection Agency has published a short position statement on the health impacts of municipal waste incineration, which reaches similar conclusions. It isn't obvious to me actually that relies on any particular document.
Oh, right. So you're now suggesting, are you, that you think it's just a general statement that wasn't founded on any?
No, that's not what I meant.
Well,
You suggested that was completely dependent on a specific document. I'm saying they're referring to a specific document
right.
in that paragraph.
No, you're saying they're not referring to the specific document in that paragraph. What is it you think that this was based on then, Mr. Wilson? Because a moment ago you did seem to agree with me.
I think it is likely that the DEFRA study will have influenced that paragraph.
Right. Now, can we then turn to the DEFRA study, if that's what you wanted us to look at?
And that's 85.
85.
Yeah.
Now, you take this where you want. I think we do see at page 13, we're told the approach that was used for the study. Do you think it's a better place for us to go to into those details?
Yes, I don't have page numbers.
Oh, you don't, I think it should be at the bottom right hand.
No, it's fallen off the bottom.
Oh well, I do actually have a measurement here.
We had a tantalising top half of it.
So, if you go to chapter 1, Mr. Oakham,
Yes.
which is page 9 where I've got it, and then you go on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages effectively, you will get at the top of the page says what's different about this report, and then middle of the page says the approach used, which I think summarizes what they did. Is that right?
Yes.
And we can see that they tell us that they undertook a literature review.
Yeah.
And then they've got a section saying comparing emissions from different municipal solid waste management facilities. And they tell us at the bottom of that section that information on emissions is useful for comparing different waste management options, but it doesn't allow us to identify the health effects of these emissions. To do this, we need to investigate the exposure of local people to the substances emitted. This is described in the next section. And then they deal with evaluating the health effects. And then they tell us this is how we check the quality of the study in order to make sure the report was as complete as possible. The conclusions were supported by information different. Ask the Royal Society to look at the report in detail and see how the report was written. So what is it you're telling us you think DEFRA did here?
Well, no, we went for this because you stated this report depends on only 23 studies.
Yeah.
And I said I wasn't sure that was true. You've taken to this and asked me to demonstrate that you're not right, rather than you asking me to take it where it is. And the obvious point actually is that in the lit review it said we carried out an extensive search and review of available literature relating to waste management activities. Over 600 papers covering a wide range of sources were covered. So your figure was 23. I don't agree with that figure.
Right.
I've not said what the figure is. And you haven't taken me anywhere that shows me it's 23.
So, sorry, I'm not quite sure the position you're
Sorry, Mr. President, you stated...
No. I'm not quite sure what your position on this is. Are you saying you don't know what it is that they've looked at on the study, or are you telling me it's something different? I'm not quite sure.
You put to me
Yeah.
that the DEFRA study is based on 23 papers, isn't it? Or 23 studies, I think it was I was. And I said I didn't think that was true. That's as far as we've got here.
Just open that. All we have, I think, sadly, Mr. Oakham, before the inquiry, is the extended summary. Is that right?
That appears to be true, yes.
I think the position is this, isn't it? That if we look at which we haven't got in front of us at the moment, the full document, and look at what was available for incineration, review of the effects of incineration, we find that there are 23 studies that are reviewed. But if you're telling me you don't know, I may not be able to press you any further.
I will have to check, because not the document we put in, obviously.
It's a statement you're aware of, but it's of course to Mr. Watson's proof, and you picked him up on many things when you thought it appropriate to do so.
I did put a careful caption that we hadn't necessarily got in everything.
I understand that, Mr. Now, in this case, Mr. Oakham, the proposal involves, doesn't it, an abnormally low staff?
Yes, the shortest that.
Well, you're unaware, I think, of any similar biomass plant operating with a staff of less than 45 metres.
Of this size, yes.
And likewise, I think you're unaware of any similar size plant operating with a stack which is only effectively 2 metres higher than the building.
shame.
Right, too far back on the text. Right, I have too many documents.
Sorry, I know the feeling.
So that specific point hasn't been put to me.
I think your position is you think it's true, but if you're
the answer is I'm aware of one, which is a polylitter combustion plant in Holland, but I'm not convinced it's particularly relevant.
Yeah. I mean, if it's something you want to check on, Mr. Oakham, by all means.
I'm not aware, certainly in the UK, I'm not aware of one.
Right, thank you.
We could be looking to take a break whenever it's...
Yes, I can probably... Well, I'm happy to take one. I haven't quite finished with the stand, but I'm happy to take one now. So
well, if you'd rather carry on...
I'm entirely in your hands.
I'd certainly want to break, within 20 minutes.
Oh, well, we'll have no difficulty doing that.
Sorry?
We'll have no difficulty breaking within 20 minutes.
Okay.
The stack height has been fixed by the constraint imposed by the airport.
That's right.
And in the absence of that constraint, in reality, you and your clients would have been looking for a higher stack, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And indeed, one would perhaps have expected something comparable to the stack at the proposed biomass facility in Marshes.
Yes, probably slightly shorter, but that sort of level, yes.
And the Incinerator's stack height is 85 metres.
Yes.
And that height was fixed in that case with respect to reduction in ground level nitrogen dioxide.
It was, that stack height was fixed with two influences. One was the impact on the Mersey estuary, which is an SAC in relation to nitrogen, and also because there was a specific cumulative impact assessment in relation to the consented RDF combustion plant next door.
And I think the explanation that was given for fixing it at 85 metres rather than something different was that beyond 85 metres you didn't get any substantial reduction in ground level concentrations of
Yes, that's what we said, I think.
nitrogen dioxide.
Yeah.
So when I put it to you that the height was fixed with respect to reduction in ground level concentrations of nitrogen dioxide, I think the answer was yes.
The answer was yes.
Thank you. So this is a so what we have here with this proposal is a non-standard arrangement.
Yes.
It's not the type of arrangement one would see if one went to look at any modern facilities.
Yes, that's probably true, yeah.
And therefore, when we see advice about the effects of modern facilities, this type of arrangement was not anticipated in that advice, was it?
I don't think we can conclude with that, but I can see where you're coming from.
Well, I think if you'd been asked, Mr. Oakham, at the time that the advice was drawn up, do you anticipate seeing a stack for this sort of size biomass plant of only 45 metres? And was that being considered? I think you just said no.
Yeah, I'd expect to cover a stack which is higher than that. Yes, to ensure that we were more outside the range of the building effect, which is the real purpose of the stack.
So when we consider all of that advice about the effect of modern world around incinerators, that advice would not have been drawn up with this type of non-standard arrangement in mind, would it?
It was drawn up based on the assessment of impact from this type of facility, which would normally have drawn stacks.
Yeah. So it wouldn't have had this type of arrangement in mind, would it?
Potentially not.
Which again, if one's looking at it from the point of view of the public and their concerns, introduces a further degree of uncertainty in this case, doesn't it?
It does suggest that this is not what they would normally see. As I've explained, work has been done to minimise that, but I'm sure we can discuss what we go over that
We
again.
but again, it will clearly impact upon those concerns the public may have about the health impacts associated with this proposal.
I suppose it will.
So that's a convenient point to stop.
Okay, thank you very much. Are you resuming questions?
Oh yes,
Yes, you are. Okay,
so that's fine. So again, I'm fighting with that.
Check that. We'll break until 3:30.
It's Mason Plastics Technology.
Thanks, mate. Yeah.